October is when California changes, the beaches empty out, the mountains grow colder, the sun still shines, but something feels off. Maybe it is the wind whispering through redwoods, maybe it is the fog rolling over the coast, or maybe it is the things that come alive when the month begins. Tonight, you are about to hear 7 true terrifying October encounters from California. Each one told by someone who swore what they experienced still haunts them every time the leaves start to fall. Before we begin, if you love true horror stories that feel real, stories that chill your spine long after they end, make sure to subscribe to Fear Begins and turn on notifications. Because tonight October begins. The locals said the redwoods whispered at night, but when Jordan heard it for the first time, it didn't sound like whispers. It sounded like breathing. He and his girlfriend, Lily, were the kind of couple who loved chasing quiet places. They had spent most of September buried in city noise. Traffic, phones, arguments over work schedules. When October rolled around, they wanted silence. Big Sur seemed perfect. The drive down Highway 1 that Friday was picture perfect. Waves smashing into jagged cliffs, the setting sun painting the sky with a molten red glow. Everything looked peaceful, but as they drove farther south, cell service vanished, the GPS froze, the radio turned to static, and the road narrowed until the trees swallowed everything. Lily smiled nervously. "It's kinda beautiful," she said. Jordan nodded. "Yeah, kinda." They found a small pull-off leading into an unmarked trail. He had read online about a hidden camping spot deep in the redwoods, far from tourist noise. They parked, grabbed their packs, and followed the path into darkness. The air changed within minutes. The sound of the ocean faded, replaced by the rustle of branches that didn't quite match the wind. It was damp, heavy, like the forest was breathing around them. By the time they found a clearing big enough for a tent, night had already dropped. The last slice of daylight glowed behind the trees like a dying ember. They worked fast, tent up, firewood stacked, lighter flicking in shaky hands. The flames finally caught, dancing weakly against the towering red trunks. For a moment it felt peaceful. Jordan leaned back, stretching, listening to the fire pop. Lily handed him a marshmallow on a stick. "So," she said, "what are you thinking about?" He shrugged. "Just how quiet it is. Isn't that the point?" "Yeah, but..." He looked around. "It's like the quiet's too quiet." They laughed, trying to shake it off, but that silence lingered, thick and watching. Around midnight, a faint sound broke it. At first it was distant, like someone walking through wet grass. Step, pause, step. Lily frowned. "You hear that?" "Probably a deer." The steps stopped. Then came a faint clink, like metal brushing against metal. Jordan pointed the flashlight toward the trees. The beams sliced through fog, hitting nothing but trunks and mist. But the smell came next, a faint sweetness, rose perfume. So strong it didn't belong out there. Lily stood up. "That's not normal, right?" Jordan tried to sound calm. "Maybe someone's nearby, another camper." At midnight, before he could answer, something moved beyond the light's reach, a shadow slipping between the trees. Then a voice, soft, female. "Hello?" It wasn't Lily's voice. It came from behind her. Jordan spun the light, and there she was. A woman standing between 2 redwoods, wearing a long red dress, soaked as if she had just walked out of the ocean. Her hair hung in strings, dark and dripping. Her skin reflected the light in a pale shimmer. Lily whispered, "Do you see her face?" Jordan tried to, but her head was slightly bowed. Then slowly the woman looked up. Her eyes were wrong, gray, almost colorless. And even from 30 feet away, he could see she was crying, tears cutting through the dirt on her cheeks. Jordan raised the light higher. "Hey, are you okay? Are you hurt?" The woman tilted her head just a little. Then, without moving her mouth, she said, "He left me," Lily gasped. "Jordan," she spoke, but her lips didn't move. Jordan blinked. "Maybe." Maybe she's drunk or something. The woman took one slow step forward. The fire flickered low, wind circling the clearing like a warning. Her bare feet didn't make a sound on the pine needles. Jordan dropped the flashlight when the smell hit him. Stronger now, roses and salt water. He grabbed Lily's hand. "Get in the car, now." They ran. The forest suddenly felt endless. The trees all the same, their path erased. Branches scratched at their jackets like hands trying to hold them back. Behind them, that faint voice whispered again. "He left me. He left me." By the time they found the car, both were shaking. The forest had gone silent again. Too silent. Except for the faint sound of waves far away. They slammed the doors. Jordan started the engine, headlights cutting through mist. But just as the beams lit the trail ahead, she was there. The woman in the red dress stood in front of the car. Hair hanging wet, eyes staring dead ahead. Jordan froze. "She's right there." Lily was crying now. "Go, just go." He hit the horn. Nothing. The lights flickered, and for a second, everything went black when the headlights came back on. She was gone. They didn't look back, drove straight through the winding mountain roads until the first sign of civilization showed up. A gas station in Carmel. They didn't speak the whole ride, just sat there breathing, the scent of roses somehow still faint in the air. The next morning, Jordan searched Big Sur red dress ghost. The results made his stomach drop. A woman named Margaret Holden disappeared in 1964 near that same trail. Her fiancé was a sailor who vanished at sea 2 days before their wedding. Locals say she searched the cliffs for him every night until she fell into the ocean and drowned. Every October, campers see her walking through the redwoods, soaked, smelling of roses, looking for the man who left her. Lily told him to stop reading, but that night when he showered, Jordan swore the bathroom smelled faintly of roses again. They say some roads never end. They just keep leading you back to the same nightmare. For Marcus, that nightmare started in the middle of nowhere, on a stretch of road known only to truckers and desert wanderers. Route 190, cutting through Death Valley. He had been hauling freight from Bakersfield to Las Vegas. October heat still clung to the desert air, the kind that made the horizon shimmer and twist. The sun had long dropped, leaving behind that eerie orange haze that always makes empty places feel haunted. Marcus wasn't easily spooked. He'd been driving rigs for 15 years, slept in truck stops, broken down in storms, even had a few close calls with drunks on the road. But this night, this one, felt off before it even began. He kept seeing the same car in his mirrors. It was an old black sedan, maybe from the 60s, headlights dim and yellowed. It had appeared behind him after the last gas stop near Furnace Creek and stayed there for hours, sometimes close enough that he could see its cracked grille in his rear view, sometimes vanishing for miles only to reappear again. By midnight, the desert had gone silent, the kind of silence that eats radio static. Even the CB chatter had died off. He glanced in his mirror again. The car was gone. Relieved, he leaned back, cracking open a bottle of water. But as his headlights swept across a sign that read, "No services next 50 miles," something flashed across the road ahead. A shape human-sized. Marcus slammed the brakes, the rig screeching to a stop. His heart pounded as dust swirled around him. Glowing red in the taillights, he jumped out, flashlight in hand. "Hey! You okay?" No answer, just the sound of wind sweeping through sand. He walked forward, the beam cutting through the dark. The road was empty, but there, just off the shoulder, were bare footprints leading into the desert. Bare in Death Valley, he followed them a few steps, calling out again, "Hello!" Then faintly, laughter soft. Breathy laughter coming from the darkness. Marcus froze. The sound didn't echo like it should have. It was close, too close. He swung the flashlight wildly, scanning dunes and rocks. Nothing. The air seemed to grow heavier, hotter. He backed away, fast. When he turned to get back in the truck, the black sedan was there again, parked right behind his trailer, engine running, headlights off. He hadn't heard it approach. He shouted, "Hey! You trying to get yourself killed?" The driver door slowly opened. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a white shirt, suspenders, and an old fedora. His clothes looked wrong, dusty, like he'd stepped out of a black and white photo. The man smiled faintly. "Evening," he said. His voice had an old radio static hum to it. "You shouldn't be out here," Marcus frowned. "You either." The man looked past him toward the dunes. "They don't like company after midnight." "What?" The man tilted his head, that faint grin never fading. "The ones walking, the ones that never stop walking." Marcus's skin crawled. "You drunk man." The stranger chuckled softly, stepping closer. His boots didn't make a sound. "I told the last driver the same thing." He didn't listen either, before Marcus could speak. The man turned and vanished, just like that. No sound, no motion, gone. Marcus ran back into his rig, slamming the lock. His hands trembled as he tried to start the engine, but the dashboard flickered. Every light on it blinked in sequence, then went black, and then in the side mirror. He saw them, figures, dozens of them walking out of the desert barefoot, pale under the moonlight, men, women, some holding hands, some dragging their limbs. Their faces looked sunken, like they'd been walking for years under the desert sun. Marcus froze, heart thundering. One of them reached the side of his truck, pressing a hand against the window. The skin on the hand was cracked like dry clay. The eyes that met his through the glass were hollow. Then he heard a voice whisper in his cab, "Join the walk." He screamed, hitting the ignition again and again until the truck roared to life. He floored it, tearing down the highway. In his rearview mirror, the figures stayed on the road, fading slowly into the night mist. He didn't stop until dawn. At a diner outside Pahrump, he stumbled in, pale and shaking. The waitress, an older woman with a cigarette tucked behind her ear, looked at him with wide eyes. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Honey," he laughed nervously, "more than one." When he told her what he'd seen, her face turned serious. "You're not the first," she said. "They say that road's cursed. Every October, drivers see the walkers. People who died crossing that desert back in the Dust Bowl days. Some never found their way out." Marcus didn't respond. He just stared out the diner window, watching the sun rise over the endless sand. In the reflection of the glass for just a second, he swore he saw that old black sedan parked outside. He blinked, gone, when he finally got home to Bakersfield. He washed the dust off his truck, but even after 2 scrubbings, he noticed something strange on the back bumper. Bare footprints, perfectly outlined in white dust. And no matter how many times he washed the truck after that, they always came back. Some places are built wrong, not because of the walls or the wiring, but because of what still lives in the air. Becca found that out the hard way one cold October night, somewhere along Highway 99, heading north through California's Central Valley. She had been driving for 9 hours straight, exhausted after visiting her parents in Los Angeles. She was supposed to reach Redding before midnight, but a thick fog rolled in, swallowing the road whole. The radio crackled with static, and even her GPS started glitching. The blue dot spinning, directionless. She spotted a faded neon sign through the mist. Silver Orchard Motel. Vacancy. The place looked ancient. A horseshoe of 12 rooms, a cracked pool in the center, and an overgrown orchard spreading behind it. The trees looked almost skeletal in the moonlight, branches reaching out like fingers, but she was too tired to care. She pulled into the lot, parked and went inside. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly rotten beneath it. The man at the front desk was thin, with a crooked tie and a nervous smile that never reached his eyes. "Traveling alone?" he asked. Becca hesitated. "Just passing through." He slid her a key. "Room 7. Don't mind the orchard. Kids used to sneak in there to pick apples. We keep it locked now." "Why?" she asked. His smile stiffened. "Insurance." She nodded, too tired to pry. Room 7 looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. Faded curtains, an old rotary phone, and a lamp with a flickering bulb, but the bed looked good enough. She threw her bag down, showered, and fell asleep almost instantly. Sometime after midnight, she woke to a faint tapping sound. At first, she thought it was wind against the window, but the tapping was rhythmic, steady, like knuckles. She turned on the lamp. The bulb buzzed, weak and yellow. The room was empty. She checked the window, locked. Then she froze outside. Through the curtain gap stood a man. He was facing the window, head tilted slightly. The fog behind him glowed faintly under the parking lot light, outlining his shape. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. Becca's stomach knotted. "Oh my God," she whispered. She grabbed her phone. No signal. She backed away slowly, the tapping still echoing in her ears. Then came a whisper. "Do you have an apple?" Becca's breath caught. The voice was low, rasping, almost childlike. She stared at the window again. The man's head twitched slightly. Like a glitching puppet, she whispered, "What? Do you have an apple?" That was enough. She ran to the door, fumbled the lock, and bolted out into the cold air. But the lot was empty. The fog was so thick she couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Then she noticed the orchard gate. It was hanging open. A faint sound came from within the trees. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps on fallen fruit. "Hello?" she shouted, voice shaking. "Who's there?" No answer. Just another crunch. Then a laugh. High-pitched, wrong. She turned to run back to her room, but her door was wide open now. The lamp inside flickered faster, almost pulsing. She grabbed her keys and sprinted to her car, locking the doors. Her hands shook as she jammed the key in the ignition. The headlights flared to life, cutting through fog and illuminating something she couldn't explain. Between the orchard trees stood dozens of figures, pale and still, each holding something small and round, apples, rotten ones. Their skin looked wet and torn. Becca's jaw trembled. No, 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 no. Then one figure stepped forward. The man from the window. He smiled, teeth black, apple juice dripping down his chin. "They grow sweet this time of year," he whispered. Becca screamed and floored the gas. The tires spun on wet pavement, then caught traction. She shot out of the parking lot down the empty road, fog swallowing the motel behind her. She didn't stop until sunrise. When she finally reached a diner near Sacramento, she stumbled inside. Shaking, the waitress poured her coffee and asked if she was okay. Becca just said, "I stayed at the Silver Orchard Motel." The waitress froze. "Honey, that place burned down 10 years ago." Becca blinked. "No, I was there last night. Room 7, the woman frowned. "Room 7's where it started. A guest fell asleep smoking. The fire spread fast. Took out half the orchard too. They say the people who died there still wander the trees looking for something to eat." Becca's hands trembled. "You're joking." The waitress shook her head slowly. "Some nights travelers say they see the light still on, smell apples in the fog, and if you stop, they ask you for one." Becca left her coffee untouched. When she got back to her car, she noticed something on the windshield. A single apple, small and bruised, with a bite taken out of it. It wasn't there when she parked, and worse, there was a small muddy handprint on her driver's window. That night, when she opened her trunk to unpack, she found 3 more apples rolling around inside. There is something about long desert highways that plays tricks on your eyes. The heat, the distance, the way the light bends at night. But sometimes, what you see is not a trick at all. Tom was a truck driver. He had been hauling freight across California for nearly 20 years. He had seen strange lights, weird people, accidents that made no sense. But nothing like what happened one night just outside Mojave. On October 12, 2017, he was on a stretch of Highway 14, the kind of road that swallows the world into darkness. No streetlights, no exits, just sand, silence, and the soft hum of his engine. It was around 2 a.m. when he saw it. A figure standing on the shoulder of the road. At first, he thought it was a stranded motorist. The figure was tall, motionless, facing the desert. He slowed the truck, rolled the window halfway down, and called out, "You need help?" No answer. He pulled a little closer, headlights washing over the figure. It was a man, but something was off. His clothes were old, too old. A torn flannel shirt, jeans stiff with dust, boots that looked from another decade, and his head was tilted slightly downward, like he was staring at something invisible in the sand. "Hey!" Tom yelled again. "You okay out there?" Still nothing then, as his headlights hit the man full on. Tom saw it. The man had no shadow. Tom blinked, looked again. The cactus beside him had a long, sharp shadow stretching west. His truck had one too, but the man, he stood in the middle of the light and cast nothing. Tom's stomach twisted. He reached for the gear shift to drive on. But the man suddenly turned his head toward the truck. Slow, unnatural, like the movement of a marionette. The face that looked back at him was wrong, pale as ash, eyes too wide, glinting yellow in the headlights. Then came the sound, a low knocking on the side of the truck. Tom froze. The figure hadn't moved, but something else was now knocking from the passenger side. Slow and deliberate, he swallowed hard. "Not funny," he muttered, and leaned over to glance through the passenger window. Nothing there. When he turned back, the man was gone. Tom's pulse pounded. He slammed the truck into gear and floored it. Gravel spat behind him as the 18-wheeler roared down the empty highway. He drove for miles without looking in the mirrors, but the knocking returned from inside the cab. He jerked the wheel. What the hell? It came again, 3 taps from the back wall of the sleeper compartment. Tom's breathing quickened. He kept one hand on the wheel, one reaching behind him. "Who's there?" No answer, just silence, then a whisper. So faint he wasn't sure it was real. "Wrong road." The words froze him. They were spoken right behind his ear. He swerved hard onto the shoulder, dust exploding around him. The truck shuddered to a stop. He spun around, empty. He grabbed the flashlight, kicked open the door, and jumped down. The desert was silent. Too silent. No crickets, no wind. The air felt like it was holding its breath. He walked around the truck, beam shaking slightly in his hands. The sand was unbroken, no footprints, no marks. Then, from somewhere out in the dark, came that same voice, whispering again, but this time farther away. Wrong road. The sound moved. From behind him, then to his left. Then closer again. Tom backed toward the cab. Fumbling for the handle, the flashlight flickered once, twice, and died. The darkness was total. He heard footsteps in the sand. Slow, dragging, he dove into the cab, slammed the door, locked it. Heart hammering, he turned the ignition key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and roared back to life. Headlights blazed across the desert, and there he was again. The man stood dead center in the road. Just ahead of the truck, this time his mouth was open. Impossibly wide, like his jaw had unhinged, Tom honked the horn. The sound blasted through the night, but the figure didn't flinch. The engine revved and Tom screamed, "Move!" then drove forward. The figure disappeared right as the truck passed through him. There was no impact, no sound, but the temperature inside the cab dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost bloomed on the windshield. Tom drove for another hour before he saw another vehicle. A lone police cruiser parked outside a diner. He pulled over, stumbled inside, pale and shaking. The officer looked up. "You okay, sir?" Tom nodded weakly. "Think I saw someone on the road?" "Back by mile marker 128, almost hit him." The cop frowned. "Nobody lives out that stretch anymore." Tom rubbed his face. "Looked real enough to me." The officer sipped his coffee. "You know, they call that part of 14 the Shadow Strip. A drifter got hit there in the 70s. Driver never stopped. Locals say the man still walks that road. Hitching rides that never end." Tom forced a laugh. "But it came out hollow. You believe that?" The cop shrugged. "I don't drive it at night." "If that's what you're asking." Tom didn't sleep that night. Weeks later, he washed his truck and noticed a long, gray handprint smeared on the passenger window. Not dirt, not oil, something like ash. He scrubbed until his arm ached. But it wouldn't come off every October since. When he takes that same route, his radio cuts out exactly at mile marker 128. There are places that seem to hold sound longer than they should, where footsteps echo even when no one's walking. Mulholland Drive, winding high above Los Angeles, is one of those places. People say it's haunted by the ghosts of forgotten celebrities, crashed cars, and broken dreams. But in October 2019, something darker than superstition followed a woman named Clara Winslow up that lonely road. It was her first week in LA. She had come from San Francisco for a new job at a record label. Her Airbnb was a small modern house tucked halfway up the hills. White walls, floor-to-ceiling glass, a view of the city glittering below. It was perfect until night fell the first night. Clara woke up to the sound of a door clicking shut. She sat up in bed, blinking in the dark. The room was silent. Her phone said 2:37 She listened. Nothing, maybe a dream, she thought, and rolled back over, but as she closed her eyes, the faintest creak sounded from the hallway outside her room, like someone shifting their weight, slow and deliberate. She held her breath. Then came a whisper. "Do you hear it too?" Her eyes snapped open. "What?" she started. But the sound vanished. She turned on the lamp. The room was empty. The air smelled faintly of rain, but it hadn't rained all week. The next morning, she told her host over text. The reply came quick. "Old pipes, most likely. Don't worry. Happens when the temperature drops." Clara shrugged it off. She spent the day at work, came home late, watched a movie, went to bed, but at exactly 2:37 again, the door clicked. This time she was awake to hear it. The sound came from the living room, a sharp, metallic latch turning. Then the door easing open just slightly, a soft tap as it met the frame again. She got up, heart hammering. "Hello?" The motion light flicked on in the hallway. Empty. She stepped into the living room. The front door stood half open, letting in a breeze cold enough to sting. She locked it, double-checked every window, and sat up the rest of the night on the couch. Nothing else happened. The following evening, she decided to stay with a friend. But before she left, she noticed something new. On the inside of the front door, someone had pressed a handprint into the dust, long fingers, smeared like someone had dragged them downward. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, without meaning to, she whispered, "Do you hear it too?" The lights flickered. She left the house without looking back. 2 days later, she returned with her friend Maya to pack her things. Sunlight poured through the windows. The place looked normal, harmless, girl. You freaked yourself out, Maya said. Shaking her head, maybe, Clara said. But the door, she stopped. Every window now had a faint handprint, each one slightly higher than the last, as if something tall had climbed its way up the glass. Peering in, Maya's face went pale. Okay, that's not funny. They both froze as a sound echoed from upstairs. 3 slow knocks. Maya grabbed Clara's arm. You didn't tell me there's an attic. There's not, Clara whispered. The knocking came again, closer now, like something crawling inside the walls. They bolted for the front door, but when Clara turned the handle, it didn't budge, locked from the outside. Clara, Maya whispered, someone's here, from upstairs. A floorboard creaked, then another. The sound moved down the stairs. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Who's there? Clara yelled, her voice cracking. No answer. Maya grabbed a lamp and raised it like a weapon. The light trembled as the footsteps reached the last step. Then silence. The air grew thick. Every shadow seemed to deepen, stretch. The lamp flickered once, twice, then went out in the darkness. They heard it, the faint sound of breathing, not human, ragged, wet. Maya swung the lamp blindly and shouted, "Stay back!" Something grabbed the lamp from her hand and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall. The front door suddenly burst open, the latch snapping like it had never been locked. Cold air rushed in, bringing the smell of damp soil. They ran, screaming. Into the street. Once outside, Clara turned back. But the lights inside the house had all turned on, every single bulb. And standing in the middle of the living room was a figure, tall, draped in something like wet cloth. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It stood perfectly still, watching them. By the time the police arrived, the lights were out again, no one inside. The officer checked the doors, the windows, the attic, nothing unusual. You girls sure it wasn't a break-in? He asked. Maya said nothing. Clara stared at the floor, where muddy footprints led from the stairs to the front door. But only one set. She moved out that night a week later. Her Airbnb host texted her again. "Hi, Clara. Just wanted to ask if you accidentally broke the upstairs window. I found it shattered this morning." Clara never replied. Months later, she heard that the house had been pulled from the rental listings entirely. The reason wasn't listed publicly, but on a Reddit thread, someone mentioned staying there and hearing whispers at 2:37 every night. They said the voice was always the same. They say the mountains remember what we try to forget. The screams, the footsteps, the whispers left hanging in the wind. Nothing truly disappears in the Appalachians. In October of 2021, Ethan Cross, a traveling photographer from Sacramento, found that out the hard way when he took a solo road trip into California's forgotten backwoods. The kind of forest that looks too still, too untouched, as if time itself decided to skip it. He was on assignment, chasing full foliage shots for a travel magazine. But the deeper he drove, the more his GPS began to fail. The bars vanished from his phone, and the paved road turned to a cracked stretch of gravel swallowed by trees. He saw a hand-painted sign nailed crookedly to a post, the Hollow Trail. No trespassing, but Ethan didn't believe in superstition. To him, an old trail meant untouched nature, perfect photos. So he parked the car by the sign and set out on foot. The forest greeted him with an eerie kind of silence. Even the wind sounded muffled, like it was afraid to move. The trees were tall and gray, bark peeling like old skin. Every so often, he'd see carvings in the trunks, names, dates, and strange symbols. One that looked like an eye with roots instead of lashes, about 2 miles in. Ethan found an abandoned ranger cabin. The roof sagged, and vines had swallowed half the porch. Inside, dust covered everything, except one chair in the center of the room, which faced a boarded-up window. Someone had scratched a sentence into the wood of the floor beneath it. "Sit and see." He stared at it. Uneasy, but curiosity won. He brushed the dust off the chair and sat down. Nothing happened until the wind picked up. The boards over the window rattled, then one nail popped loose, then another, until a small gap appeared between them. Ethan leaned closer and peered through. At first he saw only trees. Then something moved between them, quick, pale, silent. He lifted his camera instinctively and snapped a photo. The flash illuminated the forest for a fraction of a second, and what he saw froze him. A figure stood among the trees, half turned away. Its skin looked almost translucent, stretched too tightly over long, thin limbs. It didn't move when the flash went off. It only tilted its head, like it was listening. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He backed away, but his foot hit something soft. He looked down, a backpack half buried under debris. Inside were a torn jacket, a broken phone, and a folded note that read, "If you see them, don't move. They hear motion, they smell breath." He dropped the note, his pulse thundering in his ears. The forest outside had gone dead quiet again. Then crunch, a single footstep. Ethan turned toward the sound. The gap in the boards now showed only darkness, but he could feel something standing there. He slowly raised his camera and took another picture. Flash, the figure was right at the window. Its face, or what was left of it, pressed against the boards. Hollow eyes, no mouth. Just skin stretched tight where a mouth should have been. And beneath it something moved, bulging outward. Like something inside was trying to get out. Ethan stumbled back, dropping the camera. The flash went off again as it hit the floor. And in that split-second burst of light, he saw 3 of them, all pressed against the glass. Watching, he ran. The wood seemed to close in on him. Every step echoed, followed by more footsteps. Not one pair, but dozens, matching his rhythm perfectly. Just a fraction behind, he didn't dare look back. Branches tore at his clothes, roots caught his shoes. But he didn't stop until he reached the road. When he turned, there was nothing behind him but trees swaying gently in the wind. He yanked open his car door, jumped in and slammed the locks. His hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to start the engine. As he sped off, he caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror. A shadow stepping out of the forest and onto the road, just tall enough that its head scraped the lowest branches. By the time he reached the nearest town, it was dark. He pulled into a diner parking lot, grabbed his camera, and scrolled through the photos. Desperate to prove to himself it wasn't just panic, every shot was clear. Trees, leaves, the cabin, all perfect except for one, the last image. The one taken when he dropped the camera. In that photo, Ethan could see himself running through the woods, but someone else was right behind him. It wasn't one of the pale creatures. It was a ranger, or what looked like one, dressed in a uniform so faded it barely held color. His mouth was stitched shut, his eyes black and wet, and his badge was upside down. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. When morning came, he tried to return to the trail to show the rangers what he'd found. But when he reached the fork in the road, the sign for the hollow trail was gone. In its place stood a single wooden cross. He submitted his photos to the magazine the next day, all except the last one that he kept hidden deep in his laptop. But sometimes when he opened the file, the image would flicker for just a second, and behind his reflection in the laptop screen, something pale and tall would shift ever so slightly. A year later, he received an anonymous email with a single attachment. No subject line, no message, just one photo. It showed the same cabin, same chair, only now through the cracked window. Ethan himself was visible, sitting in that chair, looking straight at the camera. Some places earn their names for a reason. Dead Man's Bridge in the northern hills of California is one of them. Locals say that bridge was built in the early 1900s, when workers were still carving logging roads through the mountains. One man, a foreman named Earl Wicks, was crushed when part of the wooden frame gave way, sending him into the ravine below. The other workers tried to recover his body, but after 3 days of searching, they gave up. No one ever found Earl again, every October though. People claim they see a man standing in the fog under the bridge, swinging a lantern, his face twisted, his chest caved in like something had scooped it hollow. That was what Nicole Turner, a 27-year-old traveling nurse, thought was just a ghost story when she heard it from her Airbnb host outside Redding. Until she met Earl, it was October 15th, a foggy Saturday morning, when she decided to take a detour on her drive back to Sacramento. She wanted a picture of that bridge, an old steel structure with vines creeping up its rusted beams. She parked her car nearby, grabbed her phone, and walked out to the middle. The fog was so thick she could barely see the trees below. Everything was silent except for the slow trickle of water. Then, a faint clang echoed underneath her feet, like a chain swinging against metal. Nicole froze, her breath visible in the cold air. Another clang, louder this time, followed by a deep, wet sound. Something moving in the water below. Curiosity got the better of her. She leaned over the edge, peering into the grey mist below. At first she saw nothing, then slowly a faint orange light appeared, swaying back and forth like a lantern. "Hello," she called out. The light stopped, then a voice floated up, gravelly, strained, as if coming through water. "Can you help me?" I fell. Nicole's stomach twisted. She couldn't see the person, just that light. But the voice sounded so real, desperate against her better judgment. She started down the side path that led beneath the bridge. The lower she went, the colder it became. Her breath turned to fog. The air smelled of iron and rot. The light disappeared. She turned on her phone's flashlight, sweeping it across the rocks and weeds. Nothing. Then she heard it again, that slow, dragging sound. Something scraping against the wet concrete pillars. Her flashlight hit the water, and she saw him. A man waist-deep in the river, clothes torn, skin pale and grey. One arm hung uselessly at his side. In the other, he held an old brass lantern, the flame flickering weakly. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, the man's head tilted toward her. But the motion was wrong, jerky, like something broken inside was forcing him to move. Then she noticed the hole in his chest, wide, empty, and the water around him was rippling, not from his movement, but from something beneath him. Nicole backed away, but her boot slipped on the mud and she fell hard. The lantern light flared as if reacting to her. "Do not go," the voice said again, but this time it didn't sound human. It was inside her head, vibrating like static. The man, or what was left of him, stepped forward. His feet didn't disturb the water, his mouth didn't move. But the voice grew louder, layered, as if multiple people were speaking through him. One fell, then two, then three. "Now you." Nicole scrambled to her feet, bolting for the slope. The mud sucked at her shoes, pulling like hands. Something brushed her ankle. Cold, slimy, gripping, she screamed and kicked free, crawling up the path until she reached the bridge deck again. When she turned back, the fog had lifted slightly, enough to see that the water below was boiling. Shapes writhed just beneath the surface, human shapes twisting and merging, faces appearing and vanishing like bubbles. And in the middle of it all stood that man, lantern still burning, staring up at her. Then the light went out. Nicole ran to her car and sped away, shaking so violently she could barely keep control of the wheel. When she reached town, she stopped at a diner to catch her breath and called the sheriff's department, reporting what she'd seen. They sent 2 deputies to investigate. Hours later, she got a call back. "There's no body," the deputy said. "No lantern either, but we found this." He sent her a photo message. It showed the muddy bank below the bridge, and something carved into the stone. "Welcome home, nurse." Nicole moved out of California a week later, but a few months after, she got another message. No number, no name, just an image of a lantern glowing in the fog, and below it her own reflection in the water. They say the bridge still stands, though locals now avoid it after dark. Some nights when the mist rolls down the ravine, people swear they can see the faint glow of a light swinging beneath it. And if you stop your car and listen closely, you might hear that same voice calling up from the fog. "Can you help me? I fell, and if you answer, something might reach up to pull you down too." They say October is when the earth breathes deepest, when the ground softens, when the veil thins, when things buried don't stay buried for long. In a small farming town outside Modesto, California, that's when he comes back. The locals call him the Harvest Man. It's just a name whispered by old farmers in bars and feed stores. A way to scare kids from wandering too far into the fields at night. But every few years, someone vanishes, and the whispers return stronger than ever. That's what happened in October 2021. A young couple, Levi and June Parker, had recently moved from Los Angeles, hoping to start a simpler life. They rented a small farmhouse on the edge of an old cornfield, one that had been abandoned for decades. The soil was poor, the stalks grew uneven, and even on windless nights they rustled. Levi said it sounded like breathing. The first week went fine, but on the 8th night, June woke to the sound of something tapping on the window. She rolled over, expecting to see branches brushing the glass. But the nearest tree was 50 feet away. The tapping came again, slow, deliberate. Like knuckles on glass, Levi sat up, grabbed a flashlight and crossed to the window. The moment he shone the light, the noise stopped. Nothing but a sea of corn swaying in the moonlight. "Just raccoons," he muttered, though his voice trembled. June didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, she found small impressions in the dirt outside the window. Not animal prints, not quite human either. Long, uneven, like something with split toes had walked upright. She called the landlord, who told her in a tired voice, "You might be hearing the Harvest Man. Happens every October, do not go out at night." June thought he was joking. Levi laughed it off too, but that night the tapping returned, louder, closer then. A deep rasp of breathing. Levi burst out of bed, grabbed the flashlight again, and this time threw the window open. The cornfield was still. The flashlight beam cut through rows of brittle stalks, catching flecks of dust and something else. A shape moved at the far end of the field. Tall, slender, arms too long, dragging against the corn as it walked. Its head was covered with a sack that looked like burlap, stitched roughly where a mouth should be. Levi slammed the window shut and locked it. June begged him to call the police, but by the time they got through, the figure was gone. The next morning they found the scarecrow, the one standing at the edge of the field, gone. In its place was a small pile of dead crows, neatly arranged in a circle. June wanted to leave, but Levi refused. "I'm not letting some weirdo run us off," he said. "It's just some local trying to mess with us." That night, he set up cameras around the property, motion sensors, spotlights, everything. At 2:13 a.m., the motion alarm went off. The footage showed the scarecrow back in its place, except this time its head turned toward the camera. The sack was no longer empty. Something beneath it moved. Levi rewound the footage, thinking maybe it was a glitch, but each time the head twitched. A faint shadow shifting under the burlap, like something breathing inside. He ran outside with a baseball bat. June screamed for him to come back, but he didn't listen. The spotlight flickered on, then off, then on again. June ran to the window just in time to see the scarecrow's arms move. It wasn't tied to the post anymore, it was standing. Levi, she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the corn. The lights went out for several long minutes. There was nothing but silence. Then faintly, the sound of footsteps returning, soft, dragging, slow. The front door creaked open. June froze, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. Levi, she whispered. A figure stepped into the hallway. It looked like her husband, same clothes, same height, but something was wrong with his face. His skin looked gray, stretched too tight. His eyes didn't blink. He raised his hand slowly, and June saw straw sticking out from under his sleeve. He spoke, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was deep, distorted like wind rushing through hollow wood. "It's harvest time," June screamed and ran to the back door, fumbling with the lock. She turned just in time to see Levi drop the bat and start toward her, his movement stiff and jerky like a puppet. She bolted into the cornfield barefoot, the dry stalks slashing her arms and legs. She didn't stop running until she reached the dirt road and collapsed. When the sheriff's deputies arrived the next morning, they found the farmhouse empty. The corn was flattened in several places, like something heavy had moved through it. They searched for days but found only one thing, a single burlap sack hanging from the scarecrow post. Dripping with blood, Levi's fingerprints were on the inside. June was never found to this day. The property remains abandoned. Locals say each October you can still hear tapping on the farmhouse windows, and sometimes, if the moon is bright, you'll see a figure standing in the corn, head tilted, waiting. They call him the Harvest Man. There is a part of Yosemite that most tourists never see, where the trails vanish, the map lines fade, and the silence feels heavier than air itself. Rangers tell people to stay out of those places, but there are always some who think they can handle the wilderness, and every October, someone disappears there. In 2018, it was 3 college friends from San Diego, Nick, Harper, and Mateo. They came to Yosemite for a fall road trip, hoping to catch the park's golden foliage before winter. But their adventure turned into something no one could explain, something that still haunts rescuers today. Their plan was simple: camp overnight at a remote spot known by locals as Mirror Creek. It wasn't on the park's official maps, but hikers online swore it had the best night sky in California. No light pollution, just stars and reflection on still water. They arrived at the park late in the afternoon, set up camp near a shallow bend of the creek, and started a fire. Everything was peaceful. The air smelled of pine and smoke. A few owls called in the distance. Then Harper noticed something odd. Across the water, a shape stood between 2 trees. She thought it was a deer at first. Tall, thin still, but its outline didn't move. It just stood there watching them. Maybe another camper, Nick said, though there were no other tents or fires nearby. The shape didn't move for almost an hour. Every time they looked, it was in the same place, tall, motionless, blacker than the night itself. When the fire began to die down, Mateo tossed on another log. Sparks flew up, lighting the opposite bank for just a second. And that's when Harper screamed. The figure was now closer. No sound, no footsteps, just there. Nick grabbed a flashlight and shone it across the creek, but the beam seemed to dissolve before reaching the other side, as if the air itself swallowed the light. Then came the whisper, a soft voice, low and ragged, drifting through the trees. None of them could make out the words, but it was repeating. Over and over, like a chant, they doused the fire, terrified the light might attract it. The forest grew darker, quieter. Then came the sound of breathing, not from behind them but all around, as if the darkness itself inhaled. They didn't sleep that night. By morning, Nick was ready to pack up and go, but when they turned to leave, the trail they'd come in on was gone. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing but endless trees and fog. Mateo tried using his GPS, but the screen flickered, showing coordinates that made no sense. Numbers shifting rapidly like the device was glitching. They argued for hours, walking in circles. The forest felt alive, whispering in every gust of wind. Shadows moved where nothing should move. By sunset, they were completely lost. Nick said they should stay put and build a fire. Harper refused. She didn't want the thing to see them again. But as night fell, the temperature dropped fast. They had no choice. The moment the fire caught, the whispering started again. Closer this time, louder. Nick shone his flashlight toward the trees and froze. The shadow figure was standing just beyond the firelight. Its body was tall, impossibly tall, its arms long enough to touch the ground. Its face was covered by what looked like bark or cracked stone, but beneath it, faintly glowing, were two dull orange eyes. Harper grabbed her phone to record it, but the screen stayed black. Then the thing moved, not walked, moved, like it was folding through the air, slipping closer without steps. Nick swung a burning branch toward it, and for an instant the firelight touched its shape. Its skin wasn't skin, it was shadow writhing like smoke. The branch went out instantly, as though the flame itself had been smothered. That was the last thing Harper remembered before everything went black. When she woke up, the fire was gone. The world was silent. Nick and Mateo were missing. She called for them until her voice broke, but there was no answer. Just the whisper, still repeating low and rhythmic, now clearly forming words. Follow the dark, follow the dark. Terrified, she ran. She didn't know which direction, just away. She sprinted through the woods until dawn, when she stumbled out onto a ranger trail. The rangers found her barefoot, covered in scratches, and in shock. She kept muttering the same phrase, "It watches from the trees." They sent out a search team for Nick and Mateo. For 5 days, more than 30 people combed the forest around Mirror Creek. They found no bodies, no gear, nothing except for one thing. About half a mile from Harper's campsite, deep between two ancient pines, they found a circle of rocks, perfectly arranged. In the center of the circle was a single burnt stick. And on that stick, carved in shaky letters, was the word, "Follow." When Harper heard about it, she begged them to stop searching. "It does not want to be found," she said. One of the rangers who led that search still refuses to go back to that part of the park. He told reporters later that the trees there lean differently, like they're bending towards something unseen. And sometimes, when the fog rolls down from the mountains, he swears he can see a shape between the trunks, tall and still, watching now. Mirror Creek is officially restricted, though the park never publicly explained why. But every October, campers still report seeing strange lights near the old trails, and hearing whispers when the wind dies. No one knows what the shadow is or where it came from. Some say it's the forest itself, punishing those who wander where they shouldn't. Others say it's something older, a spirit that guards the uncharted places of Yosemite. But if you ever hike there at dusk, and you feel like the shadows are breathing with you, do not look into the trees, because if you do, the next whisper you hear might be calling your name. There's a stretch of highway in Northern California that even the most experienced truckers refuse to drive at night. Locals call it Devil's Pass, a narrow, winding road that cuts through a gorge thick with fog and silence. On paper, it looks harmless, just another rural route connecting two small mountain towns. But every October, something happens there, something no one has ever been able to explain. It was late October of 2019 when a man named Ethan Morales decided to take the shortcut through Devil's Pass. He was a long-haul trucker from Nevada, hauling equipment toward the coast. His GPS showed the route would shave nearly an hour off his trip. He'd heard the stories about the missing vehicles, the phantom lights, the eerie tunnel carved into the mountain that seemed to hum when you passed through it. But he didn't believe in ghost stories. He'd driven through storms and deserts, survived brake failures and black ice, a haunted road. He laughed to himself. Come on. He entered the pass just before midnight. The fog was so thick he could barely see his own headlights. The road twisted tighter and tighter until the cliffs seemed to press inward. His CB radio hissed with static and the GPS froze, showing his truck icon looping endlessly in circles. Then the hum started. It was faint at first, like an engine running somewhere in the distance. But as he kept driving, it grew louder, deeper, almost alive. It wasn't coming from his truck. It was coming from ahead. That was when he saw it. The tunnel. It appeared out of the fog like the open mouth of something ancient, carved into stone, jagged at the edges, wide enough for only one vehicle to pass. The air around it shimmered faintly. Like heat rising off asphalt, Ethan slowed. The hum turned into a low vibration that rattled the steering wheel. For a moment he thought he saw something move inside. Not light, not shadow, something in between. But the road left him no choice. There was no room to turn around, so he drove in. The moment his truck entered the tunnel, the world changed. The radio died completely. The dashboard lights dimmed. The hum turned into a rhythm, like a pulse, slow and heavy, beating through the concrete walls. Halfway through, Ethan saw something painted on the tunnel wall, large white letters, streaked with rust and age. Do not stop. And then his headlights flickered. The tunnel seemed to stretch, longer than it should have been. The end should have been visible, a pinprick of light. But there was nothing, just darkness. He pressed harder on the gas. The truck roared forward, but the hum grew louder. Vibrating through his ribs, he felt pressure in his ears, like the air was closing in. Then he saw movement in his mirrors, shapes, human shapes, walking along the walls. At first he thought they were reflections, but they weren't moving like reflections. They were keeping pace with his truck, dozens of them, each tall and thin, their heads tilted unnaturally to the side. Their faces were pale, almost glowing, with hollow black eyes that didn't blink. Ethan shouted and slammed the gas pedal. Heart racing, the figures began to move faster, gliding rather than walking. The tunnel lights flickered as if the power was dying. And then the truck stopped. Dead, no engine, no lights, nothing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then came the tapping. It started at the back of the trailer, soft, repetitive, like fingertips drumming. Ethan froze. His hand trembled as he reached for his door handle, thinking maybe something was outside. But then came the whisper, "Get out." It was close, inside the cab, right behind his seat. He turned slowly. No one was there, just fog. Inside the truck, swirling like smoke, the whisper came again, this time from the passenger seat. "Get out." He pushed open the door and stumbled into the darkness. The air was freezing. His breath came out in long, shaky clouds. The hum had turned into a low growl now, deep and angry. That was when he noticed the tunnel walls. They were no longer concrete, they were flesh. Pale, veined, pulsating, he staggered backward, horrified, as one of the walls twitched, revealing an open eye, human-sized, staring right at him. He ran. He didn't know how long he ran or where he was going. The tunnel twisted endlessly, and every step echoed too loud, too wrong, as if the sound was being swallowed. And then, up ahead, he saw it. Daylight. He sprinted toward it, lungs burning, but as he got closer, he realized the light wasn't sunlight at all. It was headlights, coming toward him. A truck, his own truck. Driving itself, the cab was empty, but he could see his reflection in the windshield, sitting behind the wheel staring straight ahead. He screamed and dove to the side as the vehicle roared past him, vanishing into the dark. The next thing he remembered was waking up in a ditch outside the tunnel entrance. It was morning. His truck was parked on the side of the road. Engine cold, keys still in the ignition. He climbed in, started it, and drove straight to the nearest gas station. The clerk there said he looked pale as a ghost. When Ethan told him what happened, the man's face went white. "You went through that tunnel?" the clerk asked. "You should not have come out." Ethan never drove that route again. He quit trucking a month later. He said he could not stand the sound of an engine anymore. It reminded him of the hum. 3 months after that, another driver disappeared in Devil's Pass. His truck was found empty inside the tunnel, engine running, lights off. On the windshield, written in condensation, were 2 words: "Get out." No one knows what Devil's Pass really is. A cursed stretch of road, a tear in reality, or something older that feeds on those who drive alone at night. But if you ever find yourself on a foggy California highway, and your GPS freezes, showing you a road that should not exist, turn back, because once you enter that tunnel, you might never leave the same way. If these October encounters gave you chills, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more terrifying stories every week. And let me know in the comments which encounter from California haunted you the most tonight.